Hi, and welcome to another BIU podcast interview with me, Callum Murray. My guest for the second time is US World Cup biathlete and BIU athlete ambassador Chloe Levins, who's speaking about her mental and physical preparation for the new biathlon season. Keep listening. Chloe, welcome to this BIU podcast interview on the subject of preparing for a new season, both mentally and physically.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
So, first of all, do you have a specific training plan for, as the season approaches in October and November?
Yeah, generally autumn is the time of the year where we start to shift focus from long and slow volume training to intensity interval training. In October, the US typically prioritizes altitude and spends an entire 3-week block of training at our domestic World Cup venue out in Soldier Hollow, Salt Lake City, Utah. While there, we do a lot of intensity training as well as the first round of qualifying for IBU Cup and World Cup events. In November, the focus shifts to get on snow. And so for us North Americans, you also have to consider the travel abroad. So we have to make our way to Europe well before the first World Cup in order to ensure we get on snow and start adjusting to the 6-hour time difference, as well as make our final team selections. In the recent past, the team has traveled to Finland for early snow for the World Cup pre-camp. It's predictably very good conditions with man-made and some natural snow in a lot of years. While we also have more test racing there that will make the final decision for World Cup spots. And the entire World Cup and IBU Cup field goes to Finland this year in November to get on snow.
So how has your training plan for this period developed and changed over the years, I suppose, especially since you became a professional?
Yeah, so I was a student racing in biathlon until 2020. So I graduated from university in 2020, and I did not compete before Christmas until I graduated. So I was very much a part-time biathlete up until the pandemic, the first year of the pandemic. And yeah, then I started training full time and could finally commit my autumn and the early winter completely to biathlon. While at university, I also played golf, which is a spring and fall sport. So I would be actually doing golf competitions up until October and prioritizing that a little bit more than my biathlon training. For the US national team themselves, Soldier Hollow has always been a destination for autumn training. We have been going to Soldier Hollow in October for an altitude block for as long as I've been affiliated with the team. And that is also where we've historically had our first round of qualification races for the new season. So that hasn't changed for the team, but for me in the last 3 years, it has changed significantly as I've become a full-time athlete.
Yeah, that's interesting. So have you had to do anything to improve your resilience to be able to train and compete for more of the year than you did before?
Definitely. It's a huge adjustment to go from a student and a part-time competitor to a full World Cup circuit. The World Cup circuit is extremely demanding, and I was disillusioned to that fact last year. For my first complete tour of the World Cup was very fun, but very, very exhausting. I've never raced so much in my life. And it's so wonderful to be a part of, but definitely a big adjustment for the body. And I, luckily, with being out of school comes a lot less work outside of training. So there's a lot more time to recover, a lot more time to sleep. And I think that naturally helped me be able to adjust to the more rigorous racing schedule this past year. Although I think realistically, it takes your physiology years to adapt to the full race schedule that the World Cup demands of us.
What about diet? Do you change your diet as the season approaches? And what do you do to ensure that you're eating healthily?
Diet is crucial, especially as you get into fall training. I am a big believer of everything in moderation. I like to eat everything. I enjoy sweets. I enjoy vegetables. I enjoy different kinds of proteins. I have no dietary restrictions, and I really like to get my vitamins and minerals from my food. And especially as the season approaches, I think it's really important to make sure you're getting enough carbohydrates to replenish your glycogen storages in your muscles and your liver between those intensity sessions so that you're ready to hit the next one really hard. I treat those intensity sessions in the fall as if I'm preparing for a race. So we are, for lack of a better term, carbo loading and eating oatmeal and eating pasta and just making sure we can get the maximum amount of energy and sugar out of our body as we can during those intensity sessions. And I also love cooking in the autumn because I am a huge fan of root vegetables like sweet potatoes and carrots and beets and golden beets, squashes. I really enjoy root vegetables, and I keep my plate healthy by having at least two-thirds of it covered with something delicious like that.
Do you have diet advice? Do you have a dietitian advising the team?
Yeah, so we can opt to work with a dietitian or not. I have worked with a couple over the years, and the general consensus that I've learned is that everything in moderation is the way to a happy, healthy, and fit lifestyle. I'm not a fan of restricting anything before the season. I know that it can be a tactic for peaking sometimes, but I prefer to actually continue to fuel my body consistently the same throughout the training year and just make sure that those sugar stores are completely filled when it's time to go hard.
So it's one thing preparing physically for a season, but there's also the mental preparation. And you've said already what a huge change it was becoming full-time professional. How are you preparing mentally for this new season, and what do you do to maintain your mental health during the season?
Preparing mentally for the new season, as well as maintaining good health throughout the season, it's a very difficult task. And that's a great question because I'm still figuring it out too. I am a big advocate for having a balanced mind, body, and spirit throughout the whole year, but especially before the season starts. And for us coming from North America, it's a bit of a special situation because sometimes we don't see our loved ones for more than 4 months. So before the season starts, I really prioritize seeing people that I know I won't see for a really long time while racing abroad and making sure I have good quality time with them. That really grounds me, and it gives me a good perspective actually to start racing on solid ground and with the right head on my shoulders. While we're on tour, I have strategies in the hotel rooms. As we go from hotel room to hotel room, it can be taxing on the mind. And I always travel with at least a couple books. I'm a big knitter. I travel with skeins and skeins of yarn so that I can do kind of a meditative practice while in the hotel room. And I've found that it's really important to just make sure you have another project that you're working on that's completely different from biathlon. And that will allow your mind to relax, rest, and even prepare, I think, in a different way for the competitions if the task is meditative, like knitting or like playing an instrument or something like that. I think it can even help your performance in a way that we're just discovering.
Do you feel any sense of dread as a new season approaches?
I do not feel dread as the new season approaches. I only feel excitement. I train really hard in the summer so that I can compete in the winter, and I just long for it. I'm really excited to see old friends on the World Cup circuit, and I'm really excited to see a few new venues this year. And I think that racing is the pinnacle, and World Cup biathlon is the pinnacle of our sport. And there's no reason for me to be nervous. I'm just excited and hoping to improve.
Ahead of a race, do you use techniques, like visualization or any other techniques like that to prepare specifically for the race?
Yeah, I use visualization and meditation to prepare for races and intensity training throughout the entire year. I run through races in my mind multiple times before I actually get to the starting line because it helps me feel prepared. I can run through different scenarios in my mind in terms of varying wind conditions, varying snow conditions, broken equipment, forgotten equipment. And that makes me a lot more prepared for the actual race day to be able to handle unexpected variables like that if they pop up. So I like to visualize all the different things that can happen on a race day and feel prepared going into the day well beforehand. When I'm visualizing for the actual race, I only visualize the things that I want to happen during the shooting portion of my visualization. And if I have a mistake or a bad thought in my visualization, I'll just start from the beginning again. But I think that using your mind's eye, as neuroscience has proven over the years, activates a lot of the same neurons as if you were actually performing the task. And I think that's a huge advantage for sports like biathlon and other precision sports. If you can utilize as many neurons and activate them beforehand as possible, so it feels like you're just going through a routine, that can be very, very beneficial.
That's really interesting. Do you get any coaching in maintaining your mental health? Do you have a team psychologist?
A lot of what I've learned about maintaining mental health has come from a variety of mentors over the years, such as veteran teammates, coaches, and also sports psychologists. We're really fortunate as a federation affiliated with the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee to have psychologists available that work in a variety of different specialties. So I'm very much of the opinion that you can learn something from everyone, and everyone has a different personal experience from which they've blossomed, and that is worth learning from. And I do meet with a psychologist, and I meet with him throughout the year, not just before the season starts, because I think even entering training on a day-to-day basis with a clear mind just makes you that much more effective, productive, and clear on your task. There's a Buddhist phrase that references emptying your cup, because if you try to fill it and keep filling it without emptying it, it will just overflow. So I think a huge part of mental health and working with a sports psychologist is making sure that your cup or your plate isn't too full and that you're able to empty it on a regular basis throughout the year, so that you're able to start those trainings with a super fresh mind and a clear head and a task that is just, your only singular focus for the day.
And back to physical health, what do you do to avoid illnesses such as colds and infections as winter begins and you have to travel regularly, which of course makes you vulnerable to those kinds of illnesses, doesn't it?
We are extremely vulnerable while traveling, especially since the World Cup schedule is so rigorous. Our bodies are tired. Sometimes in a location that we're not used to, we might not like the food. Our nutrition could be lacking. There's a lot of variables when you're on the road that play into immunity and staying healthy throughout the racing season. I was really, really fortunate this past year to not get a single cold throughout the entire World Cup season. Didn't have one scratchy nose or one sniffly nose, and it was amazing. I think that I made sure to get at least 8 hours of sleep every single night. If I didn't particularly enjoy the food at a certain location, I would just make sure I went to the grocery store with the team van as soon as I could, and I had food that I enjoyed and that was predictable, across different grocery stores in Central Europe or Scandinavia. And then also, obviously, a lot of people, we all practice this since the pandemic, is wearing a mask while traveling. I always have a bottle of hand sanitizer in every single one of my bags, every single one of my pockets, in my jackets. And we also use disinfecting wipes a lot for the high touch surfaces when we travel by train, bus, or plane, especially. And yeah, I think that there's bacteria everywhere, and that's the reality. But I think that also having confidence in your immune system to be able to fight against pathogens and just believing that it is strong. The mental aspect of immunity plays a big role in it as well. And being anxious about getting sick is only going to make you more susceptible. So I tend to err on the side of caution, obviously, but also confidence in my own body's ability to fight against pathogens throughout the season.
And finally, Chloe, do you have any preparation tips for young athletes who are approaching their first season as a professional?
Yeah, my advice to the younger generation and the generation of rookies coming up to the World Cup and the IBU Cup circuits this year is to just be your own best friend. Biathlon is a very, very difficult sport, and it only gets harder if things aren't clear in your own mind. It took me until about my 7th year in my biathlon career to realize that frustration really is the thief of growth. And it's better to be your own best friend than your own worst critic in a sport like biathlon.
Great advice. Chloe, thanks very much. Really interesting and really good to speak to you again.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.